All righty.
Hi. Nice to see you again.
Nice to see you too. Just a little tidbit. I, in an earlier life, had the great privilege and sometimes great fun of actually being your guest on your show, and I know we've in the past have had some pretty interesting conversations. So it's nice to have the tables.
Well, I always love talking to you because although we've had a bit of a different journey in politics, I think people know your political history. One of the things that I always
for better, for worse.
Well, we were just talking about that there once was an era of blue liberals, and it may be that era is returning, and that I think would actually be good for the country if we had a few liberals elected that actually value the oil and gas industry and economic growth. So it was. I'm glad that you're adding your voice in this forum.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. And I will point out the largest round of applause just there was from another significant. You're post-partisan, I know, but John Manley is known to be one of the liberals that we've had in our history that really was...
Nice to see you, Mr. Manley.
Red Tory, blue liberal. Fundamentally, we need an awful lot more pragmatism in this country. And on that note, I'm at... Yes, here. And
you know what I think, I've said this a couple times, but it's probably, since we're starting there, probably bears saying again. One of the things that Ralph Klein was really influenced by was the labor politics in New Zealand. And the prime minister at the time there, he was always of the view that you, as a socialist, that you can't spend money until you earn it. And so you actually have to have a very strong economy to generate the revenue that allows you to achieve your social agenda. And I think that Klein was very influenced by that. But I think that that's what the crossover is. It's the emphasis that we put on making sure that we have a strong economy so that it can generate the wealth that we need to achieve our aspirations.
Totally agree. I will also say in Canada, we've had some interesting history that kind of belies the assumptions about the color. This was not part of the script, by the way, but Saskatchewan has had a history of balanced budgets under very significant NDP governments in the past. And those are things to look back and say, pragmatic, thoughtful, getting things done.
Well, and let me add to that with Gary Duerg. I remember when he was ambassador, he's given a couple of speeches in Alberta, and I asked him about that. I said, "You're unusual as an NDP former premier," and he said, "Well, we had a lot of farmers who voted for us, and you have to have a very pragmatic streak to be able to support." And continue to get the support. And I can tell you what a delight it's been to work with NDP Premier Wab Kinew, who I think was surprised when he first got elected. The very first thing he had to do was repair a burst oil pipeline. So I don't think he expected that was going to be his first act. But he's also been one of the strongest voices around the table demanding the federal government achieve its 2% NATO commitment as a gateway. He, I think, was one of the ones who led the conversation with us and ultimately resulted in the Premier signing on to a communique, knowing that our relationship with the United States, continuing on the trade front, was predicated on us meeting them on the issues that mattered the most to them, which was security. And I'm pleased to see that the new government has announced an acceleration of that target. But look at as well, he just is very proud to have announced that they approved the first gold mine in 15 years in his province. And he's been very constructive in public, saying that a gateway to Churchill is a gateway that also includes oil and gas pipelines. And so the old traditional lines of partisanship, I think that's kind of been thrown out the window in the last 6 months as people are looking for ways to work together.
And I will say, I don't think you were here for it, but when Prime Minister Krejcim made a comment earlier about, Donald Trump, he didn't say it this way, but, very much because of what's been happening with Donald Trump, polling is showing that the people in Quebec are much less inclined to be talking about doing something away from Canada, for example. It was very, very, the strong Canadian that he is and has been for so many years. Again, this is not the script, but what an opportunity we have in this country right now, as we are recognizing the need to pull together, which I think is fantastic.
Yeah, I think that maybe greatly surprised the bloc leader. I think 6 months ago he was thinking he was cruising to being official opposition, and he barely, I think he barely hung on. And I think that I don't know what will happen with the Parti Québécois fortunes. They've been polling ahead, but there is a bit of a recalibration taking place there as well.
Yeah, and I would also say, having spent a lot of time in Quebec, and when we look at the Parti Québécois as a possible new government, next government in Quebec, it is not synonymous. Anti-oil and gas is not synonymous with a separatist sentiment. And I wouldn't be surprised, even if they do form government, if there's a much greater practical sense of, oh yeah, they're in energy, both renewable, clean, and conventional. I will actually like to keep saying that conventional in Canada is rapidly becoming cleaner all the time. They're not contradictory terms, but it'll be very interesting to see, even if they form the next government. I think we will see again an opportunity for pragmatic approach to what we do, as our friend John Manley often calls it, the family business in Canada is resources.
Very true, and I think that has also begun with the Russian invasion of Ukraine and Europe just so desperate to get a different source of liquefied natural gas. I promised François Legault that every time I met him, and I've held true to this, that I would lobby him on developing Quebec's substantial natural gas resources. They do at current consumption levels. I think they have a 200-year supply. And they did have a number of different projects that ended up getting quashed over the last few years as the world, in Quebec, turned a different track. But those conversations are now beginning. I think the further north you go, the more social acceptability is the word that he's using that you get. But if they could develop an export facility in Quebec, maybe also have Nova Scotia, which has now lifted the fracking ban, they are also positioned, I think, to be able to feed that European market. I think that could be transformative as well. So I'm really hopeful that whoever ends up taking the leadership on this, Legault has 18 more months left before he faces re-election. I think he could make a lot of progress in that time.
Well, and I think when you talk about pragmatic politicians, and we saw a couple politicians here earlier who have done so much for the country, not for themselves as politicians, for the country. And sometimes a lot of those decisions, some really tough decisions made. Here's hoping maybe François Legault looks at his future legacy and thinks, well, maybe I'm not going to get reelected, but maybe I could actually do the right things for the province. I think that'd be great. I think we're supposed to go to the script.
Sure, let's do it.
This is fun. We could do this a lot. Okay, topic, Alberta's role in global energy. Go figure. The name of this fireside chat, even though we don't have a fire, is Alberta's role in global energy. We have the G7 leaders coming to Kananaskis this weekend. What do you see as Alberta's role in global energy in the context of the fact that we have these global leaders all in a position to have pretty important and informal and real conversations with each other?
So I'm also the Minister of International and Intergovernmental Relations. So whenever ambassadors come through Alberta, I have the conversations with them. And I have been meeting with every world leader or their representative that I can to make the very strong case that Alberta is the answer in so many ways. So I was just in South Korea and Japan, and they are, as you probably know, joint venture partners in LNG Canada. A company from each has a 15% stake in LNG Canada, and I heard they wish that they had double that amount. So that actually bodes well, I think, for LNG Canada to be announced. We also, now that Trans Mountain has been opened up, I think everyone thought all of those barrels would be destined to serve the refineries off the U.S. West Coast, and in fact, half of them are going overseas. Korea just announced that they have 3 refineries that are increasing the amount of heavy oil that they'll be receiving from us to a tanker a month, which is another $1 billion, and they're willing to take more. So when I look at what has happened with, albeit with a more hostile Liberal government that was not in love with pipelines, we still managed to get 2 built, the Coastal GasLink, which will feed the LNG markets, as well as the Trans Mountain. But that is, I think, an indicator of how important it is for us to have a diversified market, because now The differential has closed. The revenues are up. The Trans Mountain just announced it was giving a $1.25 billion payment to the government. It's already helping to pay back some of the dollars that the federal government put in. And so that is why we have to continue to make that case. The shortest distance to our Asian markets is from that port of Prince Rupert, which is the best opportunity to expand it. So that's one argument to make. The other argument, of course, to make is to look at what Bob Canoe is approaching with the Churchill as a potential. If we can get icebreakers in there, I think we can have it open 8 months of the year, and that allows for us to get both LNG as well as heavy oil to the East Coast refineries of Canada, but then also a clear shot onto Europe as well. So we really are at a center of being able to feed the entire world if we can just get that economic corridor right. And I think that there has never been a spirit of collaboration between the Western premiers like we're seeing right now. So I'm pretty bullish on that. The other point I'd say as well is propane. We already have an export terminal that is feeding the Japanese market. Japan gets 15% of its propane already from the AltaGas terminal at Port of Prince Rupert. So I think what I have been trying to tell my colleagues is to think of oil and gas pipelines as the anchor tenant to build out broader port infrastructure. So if we can get, because oil and gas shows up 365 days a year at high volume and high value, a million barrel a day bitumen pipeline to Port of Prince Rupert would generate $20 billion a year in GDP. There's nothing, no national project that comes close to being able to add that level of value. Governments take about 40% of that. So that gives you the value proposition that we're putting on the table. In addition to that, we have the ability, I think, to finally partner our economic interests with security interests. Because if we can start building out some of that Arctic infrastructure, and Grays Bay is also one that is of great interest to our friends up in Nunavut and Northwest Territories, first for critical minerals, but maybe ultimately we build rail lines and pipelines there too. But then you can start building the security infrastructure around there as well, and icebreakers, so that we can also start using that towards achieving our NATO commitment and also defending our north from potential aggression. So I think that the marriage between those two concepts now has never been stronger, and so I think everyone is beginning to see that.
I find it really hard to say thanks to Donald Trump in the same sentence, but we have a moment. I really think we're seeing this across the country, and shame on us if we don't take full advantage. I can't have our premier mention the concept of corridors and without my little plug to the School of Public Policy. There's a team at the School of Public Policy that since 2015 has been doing extensive work on corridors. So if there's anybody in the room who wants to learn more about the incredible work that's already been done and will be continuing, we have the people to talk to. You met with Prime Minister Carney and your fellow premiers just recently in Saskatoon, and there was a lot of positive sentiment. I didn't hear you sing "Love Is in the Air," but you know, one of your premier colleagues did. So wow, that's a change. So there was definitely a lot of positive sentiment emerging from that meeting. There was focus on energy pipelines, economic corridors. Has there been a change in Ottawa with Prime Minister Carney and Energy Minister Tim Hodgson?
Well, part of the reason why Doug was singing Love Is in the Air, he and I signed an MOU, and we're going to have another one. He's coming out to do some pancake flipping with me, where we develop a more extensive MOU around energy in particular. And I think that, pardon me, I think that this is really, I don't know if I've seen this before, an Ontario premier who consistently gets to the mic talking about how we need oil and gas pipeline infrastructure. And one of the projects he is looking at is the potential for a little spur line up to James Bay. Again, with icebreakers, that also becomes another opportunity to get product to Europe. And also, if you can build in roads and rail, you can get critical minerals out there as well. So I think he sees the value of that. In addition, they make 10 types of vehicles in Canada, in Ontario. And he's just asked for all of the premiers to look at putting that on our fleet vehicle priority list so we can have that kind of mutual help for each other. We have to get rid of the net zero car regulations, which come into effect without change on January 1st in order to do that. But those are the kind of things that the premiers are looking at to support each other. And I would hope that the federal government is taking notice of that. Because I was asked by Peter Mansbridge at the Global Petroleum Show yesterday, I've got these 9 key policies that need to be repealed in order to send a signal that we're changing direction to be a genuine energy superpower. And he said, well, do you need them all? And I let him know that was my short list. I have a lot longer list of grievances with Ottawa, but that's the short list of things that we need to do in order to get the industry confidence back. Because it will not be success if we have to have the federal government build another overpriced pipeline. That is not success. The reason why the Trans Mountain Pipeline had to be built by government is no private sector operator was willing to take the risk on. And then it was built at 6 times the original value. We do not want that to be the model. The federal government cannot build every piece of critical infrastructure we need to have. They have to change the underlying conditions so that pipeline companies and producers see a pathway to building it themselves, being profitable, and also expanding production. So can't have production caps, which is what an emissions cap is. You can't have net zero electricity grids by 2035. It's absurd that we are exporting LNG internationally so that it can displace coal and reduce emissions, and then punishing Alberta for having a natural gas power grid. You cannot have net zero vehicles because that would require, we buy 200,000 vehicles a year. The current rules would say that we have to start buying 40,000 electric vehicles starting in January. I can't get them from Ontario. They don't make them. You're forcing me to get them from China, and we put 100% tariff on them. That makes no sense. It's illogical policy if we're going to take a Canada First approach. So when I say that those 9 things are kind of the initial table stakes that we need to change the investment climate in Alberta, yes, we need substantial movement on all of those. And I've seen a lot of nice words, but I have not seen movement yet on any of the 9 things that are a priority. That said, the Prime Minister looks like he's just getting his team in place with a chief of staff and a clerk, which are getting pretty high praise for their past public service roles and their pragmatism. We're putting together a table where we can begin the discussions about the things that we need to be able to move on some of those. I'm recognizing that we both need to make some accommodations here, but I think we need to see some substantial movement on those 9 bad policies.
I would say something about, water and wine, but, given all the tariff challenges and interprovincial trade barriers, that's probably a little sensitive. Your comment about the Ontario Premier, a lot of people might not remember this, but a prior Ontario Premier, Bill Davis, was significantly supportive of getting the oil sands started. That was another era of collaboration across the country. And just even you saying, Premier, we're setting the table to have these discussions. We haven't had those discussions for quite a long time. So even setting the table is a great sign. You've talked a little bit about what you want to see in terms of the areas where Ottawa can help, but a slightly different approach is, what do you think Ottawa can do to help increase investment? Part of it is related to getting rid of some of those challenges, but the other thing, and I would volunteer right now, because we've had a hard time building things. Yes, we've built LNG Canada, TMX, but with real challenge, especially with the latter. I think PTSD is too strong a term, but I think people are pretty worried about, the words are good, but if you're a private investor, domestic or foreign, what do you think Ottawa can do, or anyone else for that matter, to encourage investment after a challenging track record?
I'm looking forward to seeing what the Prime Minister has in mind with this national projects list he's talking about. And I understand the skepticism and the criticism that I'm hearing from some in industry. And I'll just put that criticism out first before potentially giving the other side. So the criticism is, if he launches on January 20th with a project list that includes 20 projects then what about the other projects that aren't on the list? Will that then create so much investor uncertainty that those will not get funded because it would be, what's the point? It's not got the golden touch. So I can understand why industry is concerned, because I think when they did the initial call for projects of national interest, there were 90 that came in, and I'd like to see all 90 go ahead. But what the Prime Minister's trying to do, if I understand it, is he is trying to identify a new fast track so that we can get these kinds of projects from identification to permitting and approvals within a 2-year time frame, which is incredibly aggressive considering what we've experienced before. And so we're going to participate in that in good faith. I am working with a consortium of pipeline companies to identify a proponent or proponents for the bitumen pipeline we want to see built to the BC Northwest Coast. We know that the Pathways Group has been advocating for a net zero project by 2050 for some time. We would put those two things together and see if we can use this 2-year fast track process to get there. So I'm going to work with the process and see if we get somewhere. What I would hope happens in parallel, though, is that we would then identify all the barriers in Bill C-69 and everything else that is causing us to have to create a fast track program in the first place. And it's not. And so the reason I'm optimistic about it is this is what the Americans are doing too. That Interior Secretary Doug Burgum leads the Energy Dominance Council with that same idea in mind. Get all of the agencies that can say no in the same room together and tell them your job is to now say yes and find the pathway, figure out how to get there. And they're moving at lightning speed. So if the Prime Minister is trying to replicate what we're seeing in the US and then work as a parallel track to fix the bad policies that will then create the favored investment environment for everyone, then I think that's a process that we should be, that is worth following. The alternative is wait on any kind of fast track process until all of the policies are fixed. And Martha could probably tell you better than I how long that would take to do with the federal configuration the way it is and the lack of a majority government. And the committee process, and I just wouldn't want to lose the momentum that we have. I see we're getting flagged.
We're getting flagged. We have time. That was fast.
Surely we have more time. Surely.
The bosses are telling us. So if we're short on time,
let's go to what's the most important stuff.
I want to jump from energy, even though that is actually the important stuff.
Well, maybe I should have said, because I thought we would have a bit more time. It just disappeared on us. But understand why, because I think the Prime Minister was so surprised when I was talking about a revamp of Northern Gateway. But Northern Gateway had Kitimat as its terminal point. I think it's important for us to have Port of Prince Rupert as a terminal point for so many reasons. Once again, the fact that we'd be an anchor tenant, we'd also then be able to talk about twinning the CN lines. And when you start talking about twinning the CN lines, then that's good for food and for fiber and for manufactured goods. And then you can build spur lines up to Hay River and spur lines up to Whitehorse. And it can come down through British Columbia's Golden Triangle, where they have 6 or 7 mines that they want to develop. And then you get a spur line going into the Ring of Fire. And now all of those critical minerals destined for Japan and Korea and our friends in Asia, that becomes something that benefits everyone. And the port system is partly owned by Quebec through their Caisse de Dépôt. They own DP World Port, 20% of it. And so this truly, that's again, I think the transformation in thinking that we're seeing is how do we get what we want by benefiting all of our other partners? And I can tell you that that conversation is happening in every single province. And that's what I think is a real difference over what we saw 6 months ago.
So that was a really short answer. So I'm going to take the liberty of asking you to talk a little bit, even if we're going to, be given the hook. But I would love you to talk about Washington. You were back in Washington recently. A whole other set of challenges facing us, not just internal, getting energy to market. We have Washington. We have Donald Trump. So you have some great, I think you have some good stories to tell. So over to you.
Well,
Premier.
let me just say a couple of things. I have an incredible U.S. representative down there in James Rajat, who was an MP for a long time. He's sadly decided to retire, but Nathan Cooper, who's been Speaker of the Assembly for a long time and has built a lot of American relationships, is going to be our new envoy down there. He's already on the job. One of the arguments that we were making to the Americans is that we believe, and this is the way you have to talk to Americans. You don't talk to them as, hey, can you do this because it helps me? It's, let me do this so I can help you. And I want to help the Americans get global energy dominance because they cannot do it without us. They produce 13 million barrels a day of oil. They consume 19 million barrels a day. The differential that they have to get from somewhere, and a lot of their refineries, because they're so old, are tooled to receive our particular brand of heavy oil, which you can't get from many other jurisdictions. You can get it from Venezuela, you can get it from Iran, and I'm putting it to them that we are a much better partner in being able to bridge that gap. But the other part that we're putting forward is, right now the Americans are able, because they get so much product from us, that creates stability for their consumers from a pricing point of view, but it then also allows them to export 4 million barrels a day of their WTI, which allows them to achieve their international security aspirations and crowding out some of the worst players. We're encouraging them to think about that in terms of being able to double that. If we can also build out these egress opportunities so that we have 8 million barrels of oil a day for export, half of it in WTI and half of it in heavy oil. Now we can have a real North American dominance in how we provide energy security to our friends and trading partners. So that is getting some resonance. I also flagged for them my concern that the Strategic Petroleum Reserve is down to very low levels, and as it's gotten lower, they realize they've got a big quality problem, so they have to do a lot of repair before they can start refilling that. But they've gone out to the market several times in the last 18 months and not found anyone to sell them at the price they want to pay. So we can help develop a parallel Strategic Petroleum Reserve around heavy oil. It's another thing that we're putting on the table for them. But then we also talk about all the critical minerals that they need. We have the ability to provide, I think, almost all of the 50-plus minerals that are on the list, whether it's the germanium and antimony and gallium that we see in British Columbia and Ontario and Quebec, or uranium in Saskatchewan, or lithium that you have here, or all the critical minerals that you have up north. We have the ability to be their preferred supplier because it's just easier for us to get it to market if we can get to a deal on that. And I suppose the final argument, and it's a really important one, and this is the one that I think that if you hear, it's interesting to hear the Interior Secretary lead with this, but they're very, very concerned about losing the race for AI intelligence manufactured to China. And when you think about that, that's what we're manufacturing with AI. We're manufacturing intelligence. And I would far rather that the North America and its allies be in the lead in that race than a regime that is still officially communist and quite hostile, and increasingly so. So that, to me, is where we also have the advantage, because we can talk about export of LNG, but we can also talk about using it locally. We are one of the best low-cost providers. We've told the AI data world, if you build your own power, we will just say yes. So find a partnership with an energy company that will be able to build the power for you. If you make some excess energy, sell it to us on the grid and everybody benefits. But then we can also be a partner in helping the Americans win that war too. I think we've got something in the order of 17,000 megawatt. Is it 17,000? It's a huge number. Megawatts worth of asks from data companies that want to build data centers here. We only use right now about 12,500 megawatts of power to power all of our industry and consumers at the height. So that gives you some idea of just how phenomenal the opportunity is for us here. I think it's the equivalent of about $80 billion worth of investment. So those are all the things that I tell the Americans. Like, if we can lead with the things that matter to them, then I think we can make the case on all of the other fronts. We have similarly integrated markets on food, similarly integrated markets on autos. And I'm really hopeful, because we keep hearing stories about it, about a 5-page document circulating on an energy and security agreement between the US and Canada that might be signed at this G7 summit. That I think would be an extraordinary step. America is still going to be vitally important to us as a partner. If we think in terms of a North American market, I think that's good for Canada, but don't want to take our foot off the gas on making sure that we continue to trade with each other across the country, east-west, and as well as find new markets. I think we can have it all, and that is also what I let the Americans know, is that one of the messages that I took away from the U.S. president is he loves President McKinley, who was a real tariff advocate in the 1890s. But then what happened? I wish he'd read the rest of the story. Two things happened. Number one, Canada said, fine, we're going to find new markets, and we did. And we developed a much stronger trade tie with UK, and so I think that's happening. The other thing that happened was in the midterms, it completely flipped, and they lost 90 seats. And McKinley, when he was president, was a lot less enthusiastic about tariffs. So I think we're seeing history repeat down there. Tariffs are their own punishment, and that is why I think the sooner we get to normalize trade relationships, the better. But I hope that this room, because I know you're all influencers, let's not take our foot off the gas. Let's not say, phew, we don't have to find those markets anymore. We don't have to do the hard things. We still have to do the hard things. If we're going to be a country that lives up to its potential, then we've got to improve and strengthen these ties between the provinces, because together, my gosh, we've got everything the world wants. And I think this is a moment in time where we can really capitalize on it.
Thank you. I couldn't agree more. I will say, because we are like past, but just remind the room what Chris Sands was saying earlier. And he had talked about how important it is, I'm paraphrasing, sorry Chris, but the importance of Canada still being willing to cooperate, to collaborate, and to engage, even though sometimes it might feel like we shouldn't because we're angry. But I think that's a really important message, and you've just described some extraordinary elements of continuing to collaborate. How can we help you is a wonderful place, I think, for Canada to be in. When you say we can have it all, I know you're saying that as the Premier of Alberta. I'll just volunteer that I think that's true for the whole country. So thank you for your leadership in all of this.
Thank you for your leadership. This is a great forum, and enjoy the rest of your conference.
Yeah, please welcome. Join me in thanking our Premier.